Hi, this is Graphically Alex coming at you with all things fat related. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe. I love to have you. So, I was just looking over TikTok and I saw this kind of story time about, I guess, somebody who was fat acceptance and somebody who had a friend who's in fat acceptance and kind of how mean so they were. So she has the caption here. It says, "Mean girl behavior is normalized in fat acceptance." I was starting to watch this. It's, a little bit longer. It's like 10 minutes. And I wanted to go ahead and just react as I was listening to it because it sounded interesting. So let's check it out. Okay. I'm a little tired tonight, so a little bit of a disclaimer, but I want to listen. So let's go.
Yesterday, I watched a video from Sam at Every Size, and I can't stop thinking about it because it made me think about a friendship that I had with someone who both of us were deep into fat acceptance and fat activism. And so the video that Sam did yesterday was talking about how mean the girls in fat acceptance are to their thinner friends. And this friend that I had, I've talked about her before. I crocheted a granny square blanket for her, and she didn't even say thank you. Anyway, so with this friend, I am about 100 to 150 pounds smaller than she is, and she considered me her best friend, and I thought we were very close. She would talk to me about her body and like her insecurities and things like that. Some of her experiences when it comes to living in a larger body. And I felt like because she felt comfortable talking to me about those things, that she was a safe space to talk about some of the things that I struggled with my body.
So, one thing that's always important, I've noticed, this isn't, in my opinion, let me speculate a bit, but I've noticed a lot of super morbidly obese people or people who struggle with, you know, toxic ritualistic mindsets, these kinds of things. Again, they tend to overlap a bit. I don't really know what is what here, but they tend to think extremely hierarchically. So everything is always a hierarchy. And, I think human beings, we are a hierarchical species, but sometimes it can go too far or it can be too much. And I'm guessing that her friend, because she was fatter than her, she viewed things hierarchically. And she probably was like, well, you're thinner than me, so you're better off than me. So therefore, you shouldn't complain to me. It should only go in one direction. I feel like that's probably where she was going in her mind, which is not great. That's a very bad way to approach a friendship. It's not reciprocal. Remember that fat acceptance as a movement, they encourage very fat people to be isolated in their lives and to not have any friends or not have anything work out because they encourage you to act in ways that will alienate people meaninglessly, pointlessly. Okay. People who have toxic ritualistic mindsets or people who are super morbidly obese, honestly, regardless, like I said, I have a hard time separating the two, parsing them apart. I don't know where that kind of competitiveness comes from. It's probably more so the psychological side of things. But there is that element there in a lot of very fat people. I think there is this stereotype that fat people are really nice or they're really sweet or all these things. And in my opinion, a lot of times very fat people are very insecure and very anxious. And I think the anxiety is definitely physically induced because of the obesity. And I think people have different reactions to anxiety. Sometimes people will be fawning and some, or they kind of like um, they're very people pleasing, or they're very nice or sweet, or this kind of stuff, or sometimes people can be more aggressive. And I think that those differences are going to be much more personality based.
If you don't know, I'm about 2.5 years postpartum. I have struggled with an eating disorder. I have body dysmorphia. I don't really talk about it all that often with my friends, but with this particular friend, because this type of thing would come up a lot, I felt like this is a safe space for me to talk about it. But whenever I did, she would always talk down to me and treat me poorly because I was hating on fat people, because I struggle with my weight, because when I look in the mirror, it's as if I'm looking into a funhouse mirror every single time. And that is very stressful and difficult for me. And I thought I could talk to you, my friend, about this because she feels comfortable talking to me about her body struggles. So why can't I do the same thing?
Well, she viewed it as you can't because you're thinner, because she's viewing it hierarchically, which the movement does. Yeah, the fat hierarchy is toxic and creates a mindset that can harm friendships. 100%. The fat acceptance movement, again, they take this likely toxic ritualistic mindset or psychological issue in a lot of people that are super morbidly obese, and they promote it as the way, which I talk about that a lot on the channel, how the movement is really rooted in mental illness, and they push it as a good thing to do because, well, they're privileged, they're more privileged than you, so you have every right to feel that way, when you don't necessarily have the right to feel that way.
When it came to food, we had some disagreements around it. They had to do with the kinds of food I would make because she would come over for dinner multiple times a week. Um, I started to experience more intense food insecurity when I had to start feeding her on top of my family of four while being poor. During the tail end of our friendship, I got diagnosed with hypothyroidism and PCOS, which are both
Such a difficult combination. So difficult. But I have talked to my friend Lisa, and there seems to be a correlation between the two conditions, where a lot of people that have PCOS, or a lot of women that have PCOS, they also have hypothyroidism. So I do wonder if there is a connection, but I'm a hypo girly pop too. I get you there. It's tough. But the combination is so hard. It's so difficult.
conditions that the symptoms of them can be exacerbated by excess hormones. And if you don't know, adipose tissue or fat is hormonally active.
Yes. She's dead on here. Absolutely fact.
So losing weight,
That's why part of my hypothyroidism treatment is losing the weight, because it's really important to actually lose the weight to fully recover. And from what I understand, PCOS is also influenced by obesity in a negative way as well. And you would think so, especially when a lot of people with PCOS struggle with insulin resistance. Obesity can contribute to insulin resistance as well, for example. That's just something right off the top of my tired head.
when you have both of those things, while difficult, can be beneficial.
Yes, 100%.
I talked to my doctor about it. We made a plan. I've been working on it. I'm still struggling with it, but whatever. At the beginning of my diagnosis, I really went hard into trying to figure out how to treat.
That means she has, three complicated factors. So she has toxic ritualistic mindset, hypothyroidism, and PCOS. So I dealt with two, which I think the two that I had, they're probably more common, which is toxic ritualistic and hypothyroidism as a comorbidity. But in my case, I believe the toxic ritualistic behavior caused the hypothyroidism, and the weight kind of maintains it, if that makes any sense. So it's very tricky. When you have a combination of factors, it can lead to a death spiral. It can be really, really scary, because I'm sure she knows, but a lot of times the hormones that are involved with these disorders, they can also exacerbate or make worse mental health issues. So she's got kind of a trifecta going on. That's very, very difficult. And it's very difficult to lose weight with all three things going on. So I really feel for her. I'm going to like this one. I really
My
feel for
symptoms
her.
holistically because I'm someone that has some medical trauma around medication. And I really wanted to see if maybe I just changed my diet and I moved more, maybe if that would help. And it did. I was for a very long time on an anti inflammatory diet. I try to stick to that. However, I love cheese. So, so during the beginning part of this, my friend also told me that she got diagnosed with celiacs. And on an anti inflammatory diet, cutting out gluten can sometimes be helpful. So
It's often really helpful too for people who have hypothyroidism. Um, that's one of the most common things when you have hypothyroidism. Cutting bread can be very beneficial, I think, because the way that our bread is prepared in the US, especially, first of all, it's genetically modified, which I'm not going to get into all that, but it's different than like European flour, for example. It's totally different. Secondly, there's like a fungus on it, which this can be in Europe as well, or like in other countries. But the fungus, I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's very estrogenic. So bread can be kind of estrogeny, as I would say, which is why when you're hypothyroid, it can affect you a lot more. So a lot of times, I'm not saying that person didn't have celiac. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying a lot of times, even people who don't have celiac, if they're just hypothyroid, they can get a benefit from cutting out bread. So, yeah, just kind of a random factoid. But I haven't eaten bread since 2014. It's been 10 years. So, because for me, it was that bad. And then where I would just feel like absolute trash if I had bread. The other thing I will say though is as I've gotten better in my hypo recovery, and in sticking to my protocol and doing these things for years, I have had moments where I've been exposed to gluten or exposed to bread. Like I had an IHOP omelet, for example, which they put flour, pancake batter in it, and I had no clue. And I didn't have very much of an effect at all. So I do think I will be able to eat bread again in the future. I just really try to avoid it while I'm losing weight because it is not a good weight loss food. For the record, bread is not good to lose weight. It's very insulinogenic. It's a lot more insulinogenic than sugar or fruit or juice. So it releases so much more insulin that it can make weight loss more challenging, especially if you're super morbidly obese or kind of in that category. I don't give a blanket advice to cut bread in general. Typically, I wouldn't. Even on like a thyroid protocol, you could have bread, for example. It's not like a hard line, but if you were wanting to be stricter or wanting to lose weight faster, I would really suggest cutting grain because it releases more insulin. and that can be helpful like when you're building muscle or stuff like that, but it's not really helpful for weight loss. So I have avoided that throughout my duration. There have been times when I've had rice and stuff, or corn. Like I'm gonna have probably some corn on Halloween. Like I'm gonna have some, corn chip nachos made in palm oil. Still sticking to that always. I don't have those damn seed oils. I don't do that. But yeah. Anyways, the point is, it can get better too. So sometimes if you're hypothyroid, it can cause like more food allergies to form. So if you work through it, you might be able to eat more foods in the future if you're less inflamed and less hypothyroid. So, anyways, it just made me think of that. So I appreciate that.
So I thought, great, you come over, you eat at my house a lot. Awesome. We'll do gluten free, we'll do dairy free, we'll make it healthy. To give you some background, I'm someone who grew up in the Midwest, and hot dish or casseroles, butter, cheese, ultra processed foods, pasta, like all of that stuff is just very prevalent in the food from the area that I'm from, or that I grew up. And I started to get away from that because I'm trying to eat healthier based on my diagnosis and trying to be supportive of my friend with her diagnosis. And she would get mad at me for like fat shaming her. When I wouldn't say anything or do anything, I would just simply present her with different foods than what I have in the past. And apparently that was passive aggressive. Also, she...
Yeah, I think her friend also struggled with toxic ritualistic behavior, and the entitlement is so it's so grating.
would eat like 2 or 3 times
Yeah, that's
what...
horrible. I actually did a video with Eric where we talked about how one of his friends that has the letter B followed by the letter E followed by the letter D, he was eating all his food. So yeah, this happens. Not good.
I would eat or what my husband would eat, which, if you don't know, my husband fights Muay Thai. He is trying to build muscle mass because he is a thinner man. He just has a very fast metabolism, and he has to eat more to try to do that. And it's really hard to eat more when there is a fifth person in your house that is eating double what you're eating. It became really stressful because there was never
Yeah.
enough food to go around. And on top of that, we wouldn't have the leftovers we typically would have that could carry us for a couple of weeks. Because if you're poor, leftovers are like a must. And
Especially for a family. I mean, it's tough.
and especially if you're trying to lose weight, meal prep is a must. And whenever you don't have a lot of time in the day, sometimes leftovers is your meal prep. After cutting off my friend, starting to eat healthier, I I was able to stop borrowing
Wow.
money from my family in order to buy groceries. I cut my grocery bill down by $1,000 a month.
Wow.
This girl was not only eating all of the food that I was making that I could have used to carry my family through the rest of the week, but she was also eating my children's snacks. I have twin toddlers. The snacks I used to go through in 2 weeks or less now last me an entire month. I didn't even realize how much food she was
Yeah.
eating until she was no longer around.
That's horrible. It's absolutely inexcusable. Absolutely inexcusable. I'm not going to be like on my high horse. There have been times in my toxic ritualistic past where I have eaten way too much of a friend's food. Um, I've done it before. I've done it. It's not good. There's nothing to say, you know? It's bad. It's bad.
There's not a lot of people that have access to my food, but she was one of those people. It sucked. And I never ever would have confronted her about it. I would have never been like, you can't eat my food, because that, like, I would never do that to someone. But the stress that she put on me mentally, physically, and financially was just like on other friendship that I have ever experienced. It was shocking, to say the least. I have never had another friend who was as deep into fat acceptance as me. And I have also never had another friend that has treated me and used me in the ways that this particular person did. Our friendship ended because I wasn't spending enough time with her. I'm a working mom of two.
Wow.
She wanted to spend multiple evenings with me a week. I could not afford that. And I did not have the time and energy to do that. I barely have enough time and energy to shower more than once a week. So I don't have enough time and energy to put up with all of the extra shit that came with this friendship. Also, she told me that I was picking my husband over her, which no friend would ever ask you to choose between them and the father of your children. That's insane.
Yeah, it sounds like that. She had a lot of issues, but I'm telling you, I mean, I wish that this stuff wasn't that common. You know, I don't think everybody that's super morbidly obese is like this, but there's a lot of people that are like this. And I don't think she's the only person that's had this experience. You know, I think about like Aubrey Gordon. I think about Aubrey Gordon's dynamics with her friends. It's a little bit similar, you know, on an emotional level. It's you know, there's different standards when it comes to friendships. It should be easy, you know, when it comes to family or significant others. You got to put up with more. You know, it's a little different for sure. But the entitlement of this person, it's really bad. It's really bad.
Have that kind of relationship. The entitlement, the disrespect, and the complete and utter disregard for other people's humanity, the lack of empathy.
Lack of empathy, yeah. I wonder if she watches. I'd appreciate it if she did. It's true. It's very true. And I say that as somebody who has experienced it. Like, I'm not, you have to remember a lot of times when I'm talking about super morbidly obese people and these kinds of things, I'm talking from experience. You know, I've been that friend that's asked for too much. I've been that friend that was, you know, had unrealistic standards or expectations. I've been that friend that ate too much. You know, I'm not coming at it from like I'm a high horse, you know, I'm on my high horse and I'm looking down at you. It's I used to be that way and it was wrong. And I stopped. You know, a lot of this stuff, I didn't do this past my early 20s, but it was very much there at that time. And I understand sometimes you have a lack of empathy because you're just dying. You're so miserable. And it's like everything is so hard that you just feel like, why should I have to live by, you know, societal standards, or why should I have to listen to social convention, or why should I have to do this or why should I have to do that? Like you just start thinking that way. And I don't even think it's that you don't want to. I think it's that you can't anymore. And then you just take on this like attitude of like, well, I don't care. I don't care about anything. Because it's like you'll put up with anything to keep that toxic ritualistic behavior. You will put up with anything. You'll give up everything to keep it up. And it's like, I've had a lot of times where I've had really severe splits with people, even friends, where it's turned into like all out wars and things like that, like throughout my 20s. I don't do that anymore. I haven't done it in years, thank God. But it's wrong. It was always wrong. And, it doesn't always go one way. I don't think this person was taking advantage of her super morbidly obese friend, but there were a lot of times where you can be, where I've been taken advantage of too, like where it's kind of gone both ways, or you get into these codependent hero savior complex type of dynamics. And, you have that with everybody. It's like it's really hard just to have a normal dynamic with people. And I'd say like in losing the weight and getting out of toxic ritualistic behavior, but especially in losing the weight, I'm healthier and I can approach relationships from an equal ground. And I don't think people understand that, one, that kind of goes away when you're super morbidly obese, and two, that it can come back, that it can help to bring that sense of equality back, you know. You can even be a source of support for other people, and I really value that when I am, because there was a lot of years where I couldn't be, and it's not good. It's really not good. But I know on the opposite end of it, there's a desperation in super morbidly obese people that have these issues, but it's still ultimately a problem that you're perpetuating, and you're making it other people's problem, and it's awful, and there's such a high cost. So yeah, I get so upset towards fat acceptance because they encourage this to happen. They encourage this to continue. They encourage you to feel good about this. You shouldn't feel good about this. This stuff is wrong. It's flat out wrong.
That I see in fat acceptance permeated through that relationship. And maybe that's a character flaw of her, but because I have been so involved with fat acceptance, I know that this type of behavior is consistent throughout the upper levels of the fatness spectrum.
Super morbidly obese. Which again, I think it's a complicated series of psychological and physiological issues. Your more physiological issues are things like anxiety, massive anxiety, black and white thinking, living in a state of survival, right? Your body is always in survival mode when you're super morbidly obese. So everything is this way or that way, and it becomes impossible to have empathy or nuance because your body is constantly trying to survive what it's going through. And it does affect your brain and how you think. And again, the physiological issues can impact psychological issues, which the psychological side, in my opinion, it's more of those hierarchical mindsets, those behaviors around food, those all of those other pieces and a lot of the mean girl behavior, I think it's psychological from damage from toxic ritualistic behavior, because it puts you in such an unrealistic mindset where it's like you can't process reality as well. It's hard to explain. It's really hard to explain to people who have never been in it. But just think of the amount of denial it takes to question, or not even question, but deny the reality of why you're gaining weight, and realize that that same suppression and denial of reality can so easily be transferred to other things. So there's so many life impacts of toxic ritualistic behavior that go far beyond even physical health. It's impossible to make a relationship work with that. And trust me, I tried. I tried my fucking hardest. But it's like I was trying and there was always this issue, and it was never going to work with that issue. And I always thought like, oh, I can solve it as I do this, or I can solve it as I if I get my life better, then it'll be easier to lose weight and it'll be easier to do these things. And it's like, your life was never going to get better when you're in that toxic ritualistic state. It's not going to, because you're not thinking clearly, you're not seeing reality, and you're having physiological complications that are making you further into it, because you get more black and white thinking, more flight or fight, more anxiety, more of everything. It's awful.
The further up you go on the fatness spectrum, the more marginalized those people become, which
and it's awful because the movement, it tries to make you feel good about doing that, good about doing those things. And you shouldn't, because they're bad.
More entitled and aggressive and just mean they become. And
because I'm telling you guys, like, a lot of people will be like, oh, well, you've lost weight, that's why you're treated better, or that's why you're having less issues with people. And it's like, it's an interaction. I didn't go into weight loss with the mindset of, oh, when I'm thinner, I can just be meaner than ever. No, I actually toned it down quite a bit in my personal life. And even this year, I've continued to tone it down in my personal life. I love being aggressive at times. I do. But I also love peace. And when it comes to personal relationships, I really strive for peace now in a way that I didn't before. And it's a huge blessing. And I was always questioning relationships and questioning things, and having ambivalence towards everybody. And it's so difficult to live life that way, because you're always waiting for something to drop. You're always like looking and watching and trying to find, what's the problem? What's this person doing? What are they trying to take from me? You have that kind of mindset. And I don't feel that way anymore. And I think, to me, at this level of obesity, that's been the best benefit so far, besides the physical health benefit, is just relational stability. It's major. It's major.
don't know what the reason for that is, but that is something that I have noticed, and I'm not the only one. Like, if you watch Sam's video, which I'll link below, this is not uncommon to see in
Mm-hmm.
fat acceptance. Like, these girls are mean. Even Michelle McDaniels did a video about the mean girls of fat acceptance. If you talk to Quirky Loves Rosie, she will tell you that she was once this type of girl.
And I'm not even a girl, but I was similar. You know, I wasn't doing it based on like fat acceptance politics, but um, yeah, I think it makes you mean. You know, I like being mean. I like being brat. I like all those things. But it's one thing to be mean and brat and all that stuff and be in control of it. And it's another thing to not be in control of it and to not have well delineated lines of friend and foe. And I think something gets caught in the crosshairs in super morbid obesity, and you can't tell who's a friend or foe. And I suffered with that a lot when I was bigger. A lot. And I think the anxiety within super morbid obesity, it can make you so paranoid. But also, even if somebody is messing with you or somebody is taking advantage of you or somebody is doing something, you're so black and white in how you're thinking that you can only ever just put up with it or blow the fuck up. When most times in life, it's more appropriate to take a middle path, to put up a boundary or to slowly walk away from the person. That's the more appropriate thing to do. I couldn't do that. So there's a lot of times where I would blow up because I've felt suppressed for so long around certain friendships or certain dynamics. And so I would explode, and then you're a monster. You know, it's so awful. That black and white mindset is so awful. And I do believe that that is physiological because it's like it can happen even with like cleaning. If you can't perfectly clean the house, then you never clean it at all. And to me, that just doesn't seem like psychological. It seems like there's a kind of mental issue or deficit within supermorbid obesity, just as an example.
This behavior is normalized in fat acceptance. The mistreatment of people who are smaller than them is completely
Mm-hmm.
normalized and justified because they believe that we have thin privilege. I don't even know what thin privilege is
Right.
at this point, but it's this now like made up thing in fat acceptance that they've latched onto that they think is a way to justify their shitty behavior towards people who they deem smaller than them. Yesterday, I watched a video from
Yeah.
Sam.
So I agree. I think even outside of fat acceptance, a lot of these things are common, but it's kind of like fat acceptance reinforces it and tells you it's a good thing. And I think that that happens because they're trends. They're not that uncommon. You know, they always talk about, oh, you know, fat rep and all this stuff. Like, they don't talk about the nasty side of being fat. And I don't mean nasty as in gross. I mean nasty as in cruel. There's cruelty in it. You know, a lot of you guys have commented and said, you know, a lot of my bullies growing up were fat and this kind of stuff. I mean, it's awful. And I don't know. I can't defend it. You know, I can understand it. I've done it, but I don't condone it, and I'm not doing it anymore. A lot of this stuff I haven't done in a very long time, but I paid dearly for it, and I want you to know that. You know, if you're picking fights with everybody or just getting nasty or doing this stuff with indiscriminately, randomly, people start to walk on eggshells around you. They don't know. Ooh, they're like, oh gosh, like, I don't know what to do. Like, it's not a good place to be. It's not a good way to be. You don't want to be a monster. There's a difference between being brat and being a monster. And I think it happens, and I think fat acceptance encourages it and says it's a good thing and says it's radical and says it's all these different things. And it's, it goes deep. So I feel for her. Um, I feel for both of them. I think it's awful all around. So, anyways, you guys, let me know what you think. I will talk to you guys again soon. I'll see you tomorrow for the last episode of that podcast. I'll probably do another podcast on Thursdays. I think that was a good format. But thank you guys so much. I will see you tomorrow. Have a good one. Bye.